I should have known something was wrong the moment my daughter-in-law stopped looking me in the eye. But you don't see it when you don't want to, do you? You tell yourself they're busy, they're stressed, they're adjusting to the new baby. You make excuses because the alternative is too devastating to consider. That your own son, the boy you raised alone after his father walked out, the child you sacrificed everything for, might not want you around anymore. I'm telling you this now from the other side of it all, because I need you to understand something. Sometimes the people you die for are the same ones who wish you'd just disappear. And when you finally hear them say it out loud, everything changes. Before I go any further, I want to ask you something. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. It helps me know I'm not alone in this, that somewhere out there, someone understands what it feels like to be invisible in your own family. And if this story resonates with you, if you've ever felt pushed aside or taken for granted, hit that subscribe button. You'll want to hear how this ends. Trust me. Also, check the description box below for more stories like this one, stories about real people who refused to stay silent. My name is Eleanor, though everyone used to call me Ellie. I'm 63 years old now, and I live in a small rental cottage about 20 miles from where I used to call home. But back then, 18 months ago, I lived in the house I'd owned for 37 years in Riverside, a quiet suburb just outside of Portland, Oregon. It was a 3-bedroom ranch with blue shutters and a garden I'd spent decades perfecting. Roses, hydrangeas, tomatoes in the summer. That house held every memory of raising my son, Daniel. His first steps on that living room carpet. His high school graduation photos on the mantel. The pencil marks on the kitchen doorframe tracking his height every birthday. When Daniel married Ashley 6 years ago, I was thrilled. She seemed sweet, soft-spoken, always smiling in that polite way that made you feel like she was genuinely interested in what you had to say. They had a small wedding at a vineyard in Willamette Valley, and I helped pay for half of it because Daniel was still paying off student loans and I wanted him to have something beautiful. I didn't mind. That's what mothers do. We give and never think twice about what we might need later. The first crack appeared about a year after they got married. I'd stopped by their apartment unannounced, just a quick visit to drop off some homemade lasagna because I knew Daniel had been working overtime. Ashley answered the door in yoga pants and an oversized sweater, her blonde hair pulled back in a messy bun. She didn't invite me in. She stood there in the doorway, one hand on the frame, blocking my view inside. She thanked me for the lasagna, said they were actually just about to head out, and took the dish from my hands like I was a delivery person. I drove home feeling strange, unsettled, but I pushed it down. Maybe they really were going somewhere. Maybe I should have called first. Then came the baby. Little Jackson, born on a rainy October morning 3 years ago. I was in the delivery room, holding Ashley's hand while she pushed, and when that baby came out screaming and perfect, I cried harder than I had in years. Daniel looked at me with tears in his eyes and said, "Thanks for being here, Mom. I couldn't have done this without you." I believed him. God, I believed him. For the first year, I was over at their house constantly. They'd moved into a 2-story colonial in Beaverton with a big backyard and a nursery painted soft green. I'd come over 3, sometimes 4 times a week. I'd hold Jackson while Ashley showered. I'd fold laundry, prepare meals, run errands. I didn't mind. I loved being needed. I loved being grandma. Daniel would hug me when I left and say, "You're a lifesaver, Mom." And Ashley would smile and thank me, though looking back now, her smiles never quite reached her eyes. But then, slowly, things shifted. The invitations became less frequent. When I'd call to ask if I could come by, there was always a reason why it wasn't a good time. Jackson's napping. They had plans. Ashley wasn't feeling well. I started to feel like I was intruding, like I needed permission to see my own grandson. And the worst part was, Daniel didn't seem to notice. Or maybe he did, and he just didn't care enough to fight for me. By the time Jackson turned 2, I was seeing them maybe once a month. And even then, the visits felt strained. Ashley would hover, redirecting Jackson's attention away from me if I tried to play with him. She'd swoop in and say, "Grandma's tired, sweetie, let her rest," even when I wasn't tired at all. I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab my son by the shoulders and ask him what the hell was happening. But I didn't. Because you don't want to be the difficult mother-in-law, do you? You don't want to cause problems. So you stay quiet, and you shrink yourself smaller and smaller until you're barely there at all. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, you know exactly what I'm talking about. That ache that sits in your chest, the one that never quite goes away. The day everything changed was a Saturday in late April. Spring had just arrived, and the cherry blossoms were blooming everywhere. I'd called Daniel earlier in the week and asked if I could stop by that weekend to drop off a birthday gift for Jackson. He was turning 3 the following Tuesday. Daniel said sure, come by around noon. So I did. I wore my nicest blouse, the lavender one Daniel always said brought out my eyes, and I brought a carefully wrapped present, a wooden train set I'd found at a local toy shop, the kind with hand-painted details that kids could play with for years. I pulled into their driveway a few minutes before noon. The garage door was open, and I could see Daniel's truck and Ashley's SUV parked inside. The front yard was pristine, as always. Ashley had a thing about appearances. Perfect lawn, perfect flower beds, perfect everything. I grabbed the gift from the passenger seat and walked up the stone pathway toward the side gate that led to their backyard. I knew they sometimes had weekend barbecues out there, and I figured I'd check if they were outside before knocking on the front door. The gate was slightly ajar. I pushed it open and stepped through, and that's when I heard voices. Ashley's voice first, high and sharp. I just don't understand why she has to be here all the time. My feet stopped moving. I stood there behind the fence, hidden by the tall hedges, my heart starting to pound. Daniel's voice came next, quieter, almost resigned. She's not here all the time. She's barely here anymore. Ashley let out a bitter laugh. Exactly. And it's still too much. Why is she still around? She's always hovering, always trying to insert herself into every little thing. It's exhausting. I should have turned around. I should have left. But I didn't. I stood there, frozen, listening to my son's silence. Waiting for him to defend me. Waiting for him to say, "That's my mother you're talking about." But he didn't. He said nothing. And in that nothing, I heard everything. The gift slipped a little in my hands, the paper crinkling. Ashley's voice came again, colder this time. I'm serious, Daniel. I think we need to set some boundaries. She needs to understand that this is our family now. Not hers. Our family. Not hers. I didn't turn back. I couldn't. My legs moved on their own, carrying me forward through the gate and straight into their backyard. They were standing by the patio table, Ashley with her arms crossed, Daniel with his hands in his pockets, staring at the ground. They both froze when they saw me. Ashley's face went pale. Daniel's mouth opened, but no words came out. I looked at my son, the boy I'd raised, and I didn't recognize him. I held up the wrapped present and set it down on the patio table without a word. Then I turned and walked out of that yard, out of that driveway, and I drove home with tears streaming down my face and my hands shaking so hard I could barely grip the steering wheel. That was the beginning. That was the moment I stopped being the woman who stayed quiet. Because sometimes, the only way to reclaim your dignity is to walk away from the people who've already let you go. I didn't hear from Daniel for 6 days. 6 entire days of silence. No phone call, no text, no apology. Nothing. I kept checking my phone, convincing myself that maybe he'd reach out, maybe he'd explain, maybe he'd say Ashley didn't mean it the way it sounded. But deep down, I knew better. You can't unhear words like that. Why is she still around? It played on a loop in my head, over and over, until I thought I might lose my mind. I spent those 6 days moving through my house like a ghost. I'd make coffee in the morning and forget to drink it. I'd stand in front of the TV without knowing what was on. At night, I'd lie in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment I'd spent with them over the past few years, searching for signs I'd missed. Had I really been hovering? Had I been too much? Or had Ashley simply decided from the beginning that I was an inconvenience, and Daniel had been too weak to stand up for me? The worst part wasn't even the words themselves. It was Daniel's silence. If he had defended me, if he had said anything at all, maybe I could have forgiven it. Maybe I could have chalked it up to Ashley having a bad day, being overwhelmed, saying something she didn't mean. But his silence told me everything. He'd stood there and let her say those things about me. He'd let her erase me. On the 7th day, my phone finally rang. I saw his name on the screen and my heart leapt, then immediately sank. I let it ring twice before answering. "Hi, Mom." His voice was cautious, like he was testing the temperature of water before diving in. I didn't make it easy for him. I said hello and waited. He cleared his throat. I wanted to call and see how you're doing." How I was doing. As if I'd been sick. As if nothing had happened. I felt anger rise in my throat like bile. "I'm fine, Daniel." He paused. "Look, about last weekend. Ashley feels really bad about what happened. She didn't know you were there. She was just venting, you know? She's been under a lot of stress with Jackson and work and everything." I closed my eyes. "And what about you, Daniel? Do you feel bad?" Another pause, longer this time. "Of course I do, Mom. I never wanted you to hear that." "But you agreed with her." My voice was steady, but my hands were shaking. "You stood there and said nothing while she talked about me like I was some kind of burden." "That's not fair," he said, and now there was an edge to his voice. "You don't know what it's like. Ashley has her own family stuff going on, and she just needs space sometimes. It's not personal." "Not personal? How do you tell someone that erasing you from their life isn't personal?" I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask him if he remembered all the nights I stayed up with him when he had nightmares as a kid. If he remembered how I worked 2 jobs to put him through college. If he remembered who was there when his father left and never looked back. But I didn't say any of that. Because at that moment, I realized something devastating. It didn't matter. None of it mattered. He'd already made his choice. "I need some time, Daniel," I said quietly. "Time for what?" "To figure out what I want. What I need." "Mom, don't be dramatic. We can work this out." Dramatic. The word hit me like a slap. "I'll call you when I'm ready," I said, and I hung up before he could respond. If you've ever had to set a boundary with someone you love, you know how much it hurts. Even when you know you're doing the right thing. Share this video if you understand that pain, and check the description box for more stories about finding strength in the hardest moments. The weeks that followed were the loneliest of my life. I threw myself into my garden, tearing out weeds with a fury I didn't know I had. I'd spend hours on my knees in the dirt, my hands blistered and raw, trying to channel all the hurt into something productive. My neighbor, Patricia, a woman in her 70s with kind eyes and silver hair, noticed. She came over one afternoon with a pitcher of lemonade and sat on my porch steps without asking permission. "You want to talk about it?" she asked. I shook my head. "Man trouble." I laughed bitterly. "I wish." She nodded, understanding somehow. "Family, then. That's always harder." I looked at her, this woman I'd exchanged pleasantries with for years but never really knew, and something broke inside me. I told her everything. The words poured out like water from a broken dam. She listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she reached over and squeezed my hand. "My daughter did something similar to me about 10 years ago," she said softly. "Married a man who didn't like having me around. Eventually, she had to choose. She chose him." My heart sank. Did it get better? Patricia smiled sadly. "Eventually. But not because she came around. Because I learned to build a life that didn't revolve around waiting for her to need me again. You can't control what they do, Eleanor. You can only control what you do next." What I did next surprised even me. I started researching. Late at night, sitting at my kitchen table with my laptop, I dug into everything I could find about financial planning, estate planning, inheritance law. See, I'd been planning to leave everything to Daniel. The house, my savings, everything I'd worked for. It wasn't a fortune, but it was substantial. About $400,000 when you added it all up. I'd always assumed he'd get it, that it would help him and Jackson have a better life. But why should I leave everything to someone who couldn't even defend me? Why should Ashley benefit from my life's work when she couldn't stand to have me around? The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. And anger, I was learning, could be incredibly clarifying. I made an appointment with an attorney. Her name was Rebecca Thornton, a sharp woman in her 40s who'd helped my friend Linda with her divorce years ago. I sat in her office on a Thursday morning, sunlight streaming through the windows, and I told her what I wanted to do. She listened carefully, taking notes, and when I finished, she looked at me with something like respect. "You're sure about this?" she asked. "You're not acting out of anger?" "I'm absolutely acting out of anger," I said. "But I'm also acting out of self-respect. And I'm done apologizing for that." She smiled. "Then let's get started." Over the next month, I revised my entire estate plan. I set up a trust. I named Patricia's granddaughter, a bright college student studying to be a teacher, as a partial beneficiary. I donated a significant portion to charities I cared about. And I left Daniel exactly $5,000 with a letter explaining why. Not to punish him, but to show him that choices have consequences. That you can't treat people like they're disposable and still expect to inherit their love, their life, their legacy. But I didn't stop there. Because there was something else I knew, something I discovered during one of my visits to their house months earlier. Ashley had a secret. And I was about to make sure it didn't stay buried. It had been 3 months since I'd walked into their backyard and heard those words. 3 months since I'd started building a life that didn't include them. Daniel had called twice more, both times leaving voicemails that ranged from confused to irritated. I didn't call back. Ashley sent a text once, "We miss you. Jackson asks about you." I deleted it without responding. If Jackson really asked about me, Daniel knew where I lived. But here's what they didn't know. About 5 months before that terrible Saturday, back when I was still welcomed in their home, I'd been helping Ashley organize their basement. She'd asked me to, actually. Said she was overwhelmed with all the boxes from their move and could use an extra pair of hands. I'd been thrilled. It felt like maybe we were bonding, maybe she was finally warming up to me. We worked for hours that day, sorting through old college textbooks, holiday decorations, baby clothes Jackson had outgrown. At one point, Ashley went upstairs to check on Jackson, who was napping. She was gone for maybe 20 minutes. I kept working, opening boxes, creating piles for donation and storage. That's when I found it. A shoebox tucked in the back corner of a filing cabinet, underneath some old tax documents. I wasn't snooping. I want to be clear about that. I was organizing their filing cabinet like Ashley had asked me to do. But when I pulled out the shoebox, the lid came off, and papers spilled onto the floor. And that's when I saw them. Bank statements. But not from the joint account Ashley shared with Daniel. These were from a personal account in Ashley's name only. An account with deposits coming in every month from something called Westridge Property Management. I'm not proud of what I did next. I took photos. Not of everything, just a few statements, enough to see the pattern. Deposits of $3,000, sometimes more, coming in like clockwork. I'd stuffed the papers back in the box and shoved it back where I'd found it. When Ashley came back downstairs, I didn't say a word. I just smiled and kept sorting boxes like nothing had happened. At the time, I didn't think much of it. Maybe it was rental income from a property she'd inherited. Maybe it was investment returns. It wasn't my business, and I pushed it out of my mind. But now, sitting in my kitchen with those photos pulled up on my phone, I looked at them with new eyes. Why would Ashley have a separate account Daniel didn't know about? Why hide rental income? I did some digging. Found Westridge Property Management online. They were a company that managed apartment complexes in the Portland area. I called, pretending to be interested in renting, and casually asked which properties they handled. The woman on the phone rattled off a list. One of them was a complex in northwest Portland, an area I knew Ashley had lived in before she married Daniel. Then I did something that probably crossed a line. I drove there. Parked across the street and watched for a while, feeling ridiculous and desperate and exhilarated all at once. After about an hour, I went into the leasing office and struck up a conversation with the young man at the desk. Told him I was looking for a 2-bedroom, asked about availability. He pulled up his system and mentioned that they had a few units coming available soon. "We actually have one owner who rents through us," he said casually. She's had her unit for like 6 years. Never sells, just keeps renting it out. Smart investment. That is smart, I said, my heart pounding. Do you mind if I ask which unit? Just curious about the layout. He hesitated, then shrugged. Unit 412. 2-bedroom corner unit. Great natural light. I thanked him and left, my mind racing. Ashley owned a rental property she'd never told Daniel about. A property generating substantial income that wasn't going into their joint account. A property she'd owned since before they got married and had deliberately hidden from her husband. I sat in my car in that parking lot, staring up at the building, and I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about Daniel too. My son, who might be too weak to stand up for me, but who deserved to know that his wife was lying to him. Keeping financial secrets. Building an exit strategy while he worked himself to exhaustion to support their family. But I didn't call him. Not yet. Because I needed to be sure. I needed more than suspicion and a leasing agent's casual comment. So I hired a private investigator. His name was Tom Brennan, a retired police detective who now did private work. He had a small office above a diner in downtown Portland, and when I sat across from him and told him what I needed, he didn't judge. He just nodded and took notes. 2 weeks later, he called me. You were right, he said. The property's in her name only, purchased 6 years ago, 2 months before she married your son. She's been renting it out continuously. Based on current market rates and the statements you showed me, she's probably made close to $200,000 in rental income over the years. None of it declared on their joint tax returns. My hands went cold. What does that mean? It means she's been hiding income from the IRS and from her husband. If your son files joint tax returns, he could be liable too. But more importantly, in Oregon, if she purchased the property before marriage but continued to profit from it during the marriage while hiding those profits, it gets complicated. He might have a claim to some of that income depending on how their finances are structured. I thanked him and hung up. I sat at my kitchen table with the report he'd sent over, and I thought about what to do with this information. Part of me wanted to march over there and throw it in Ashley's face. Part of me wanted to call Daniel immediately and expose her. But the smarter part of me, the part that had learned patience through years of being dismissed and ignored, told me to wait. Because revenge isn't about acting impulsively. It's about timing. It's about making sure that when you finally make your move, it counts. And I wanted this to count. So I waited. I kept the report in a locked drawer in my desk. I went about my life, tending my garden, having coffee with Patricia, attending my book club. Daniel called again around this time, another awkward voicemail. Mom, it's been months. Can we please talk? Jackson's birthday is coming up, and he wants to see you. I almost called back. Almost. But then I remembered Ashley's voice. Why is she still around? And I put my phone down. 3 weeks later, I got a text from Daniel. We're having a family barbecue this Sunday. Ashley wants you to come. Please, Mom. Let's put this behind us. I stared at that text for a long time. And then, very calmly, I typed back, I'll be there. Because it was time. Time for them to see that Eleanor wasn't the desperate, hovering mother-in-law they could dismiss. Time to show them what happened when you pushed someone too far. I had a plan. And by the end of that barbecue, everything was going to change. I arrived at their house at 2 o'clock on Sunday afternoon, right when Daniel said to come. The driveway was full of cars. Ashley's parents' sedan, her brother's truck, a few other vehicles I didn't recognize. This wasn't just a family barbecue. This was Ashley's family barbecue. And I was walking into enemy territory. I parked on the street and sat in my car for a moment, gathering my courage. In my purse was a manila envelope containing copies of everything Tom had found. Bank statements, property records, tax discrepancies. I wasn't sure if I'd use them today, but I wanted them close, like armor. I took a deep breath, grabbed the bottle of wine I'd brought, and walked up to their front door. Daniel answered, and for a moment, we just looked at each other. He looked tired. Older somehow. Hey Mom, he said, and there was relief in his voice. I'm glad you came. I nodded and stepped inside. The house was full of people, laughter echoing from the backyard. Ashley appeared in the hallway, wearing a sundress and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Eleanor, so good to see you," she said, and I marveled at how effortlessly she lied. "Thank you for having me," I replied, matching her false warmth with my own. We moved through the house and out to the backyard, where a crowd of people were gathered around the grill and the patio table loaded with food. Ashley's parents, Ron and Diane, gave me polite nods. Her brother, Scott, barely looked up from his beer. And then I saw Jackson, my beautiful grandson, playing in the grass with a toy truck. He looked up, saw me, and his face lit up. "Grandma!" he yelled, running toward me with his arms outstretched. I caught him and held him close, breathing in the smell of his hair, feeling his small arms around my neck. This, I thought. This is what they tried to take from me. When I looked up, Ashley was watching us with an expression I couldn't quite read. Was it guilt? Resentment? I couldn't tell. I set Jackson down and let him pull me over to show me his toys, and for a few minutes, I let myself just be grandma. Nothing else mattered. But then Ashley's mother, Diane, approached me with a glass of wine and that particular smile that certain women perfect over the years. The one that looks friendly but carries an edge. "Eleanor, it's been so long. Daniel mentioned you've been busy." Busy? What a kind way to say I'd been frozen out. "Yes," I said simply. "I've been taking care of some personal matters." "Well, it's wonderful you could make time for us today. Family is so important, don't you think?" Us. As if I wasn't family. As if I was a guest they were graciously accommodating. I smiled and excused myself, moving toward the patio where Daniel was flipping burgers. He looked up as I approached. "You doing okay, Mom?" he asked quietly. "I'm fine," I said. "Can we talk later? Just the two of us?" He looked nervous. "Sure. Yeah, of course." The afternoon dragged on. I made small talk with people who barely knew me. I watched Ashley play the perfect hostess, touching Daniel's arm, laughing at her father's jokes, presenting this picture of domestic bliss. And I thought about the secrets she was keeping, the money she was hiding, the lies she was building her life on. I thought about how she tried to erase me from this family while simultaneously benefiting from my son's hard work and honesty. Around 5 o'clock, people started leaving. Ashley's parents were the first to go, followed by her brother and the other guests. Soon it was just the four of us, me, Daniel, Ashley, and Jackson, who was occupied with his iPad inside the house. Daniel started cleaning up, and I helped, carrying plates into the kitchen. Ashley followed, setting down serving dishes with a little too much force. "Well, that went well," she said brightly, but there was tension in her voice. I set down the plates I was holding and turned to face her. "Ashley, can I talk to you and Daniel for a moment?" She glanced at Daniel, something passing between them. "Sure," she said carefully. We moved to the living room. Daniel sat on the couch, Ashley beside him, their bodies close. I stood across from them, my purse at my feet, and for a moment, I wasn't sure if I could go through with this. But then I thought about that day in the backyard. Why is she still around? And the words came easily. "I need to tell you both something," I began. "These past few months have been difficult for me. When I heard what Ashley said that day, it broke something inside me. And I've spent all this time wondering what I did wrong. How I could have been such a burden." Daniel opened his mouth to interrupt, but I held up my hand. "Let me finish. I've realized that I didn't do anything wrong. I was just being a mother and a grandmother who loved her family. But I also realized something else. Relationships require honesty, trust. And when those things are broken, everything falls apart." I reached into my purse and pulled out the manila envelope. Ashley's face went pale. She knew. Somehow, she knew. "Daniel," I said, looking at my son, "did you know that Ashley owns a rental property in Northwest Portland? A 2-bedroom condo she purchased before you got married and has been renting out for the past 6 years." The silence that followed was deafening. Daniel looked at Ashley, confusion spreading across his face. "What is she talking about?" Ashley's mouth opened and closed. That's not. "Eleanor, you have no right. Did you know, I continued, my voice steady, that she's made approximately $200,000 in rental income from that property? Income she's kept in a separate account. Income she's never reported on your joint tax returns. Daniel stood up. Ashley, is this true? She was shaking now, her perfect composure crumbling. You went through my things? You spied on me. You left your things in a filing cabinet you asked me to organize, I said calmly. And I wouldn't have thought twice about it if you hadn't tried so hard to push me out of this family. If you hadn't stood in your backyard and questioned why I was still around. This is insane, Ashley said, tears forming in her eyes. Daniel, she's trying to manipulate you. She's trying to come between us because she can't handle that you have your own life now. But Daniel wasn't looking at her with sympathy. He was looking at her with betrayal. Is it true? He asked again, his voice hard. Do you have money I don't know about? Ashley broke. She started crying, real tears now, not the manipulative kind. I just wanted something of my own, she said. Something that was mine before I became your wife, before I was Jackson's mother. I needed to know I had something to fall back on if things didn't work out. If things didn't work out, Daniel repeated slowly. You've been planning an exit strategy our entire marriage? I watched them unravel, and I didn't feel the satisfaction I thought I would. I just felt sad. Sad for Daniel, who'd trusted the wrong person. Sad for Jackson, who'd grow up with this fracture in his foundation. Even sad for Ashley in a strange way, because I understood the fear of losing yourself in a relationship. But understanding didn't mean forgiving. I'm going to go, I said quietly. Daniel looked at me, his eyes red. Mom, wait. You two need to talk, I said. But Daniel, I want you to know something. I changed my will. Most of my estate is going to charity and to people who've shown me genuine kindness. You'll receive $5,000 and a letter explaining why. Not because I don't love you, but because love can't be one-sided. It can't mean I give everything while you stand by and let me be erased. His face crumpled. Mom, please. Don't do this. I already did it, I said. Months ago. And it was the most freeing decision I've ever made. Because it taught me something important. I spent my whole life making myself smaller so other people could be comfortable. I'm done with that. I'm done apologizing for existing. I picked up my purse and walked toward the door. Behind me, I could hear Ashley crying harder, Daniel's voice rising in anger. I stepped out into the cool evening air and got into my car. My hands were shaking, but this time, it wasn't from fear or sadness. It was from adrenaline. From finally standing up for myself. The weeks that followed were complicated. Daniel called me every day at first, angry, then pleading, then quiet. We talked, eventually. Long, painful conversations where he admitted he'd been weak, that he'd let Ashley dictate the terms of our relationship because it was easier than fighting. He told me they were in counseling, that Ashley had agreed to put the rental income into their joint account and file amended tax returns. He asked if I'd reconsider the will. I told him I'd think about it. And I did think about it for a long time. But in the end, I kept most of the changes. Not out of spite, but because I realized something. I'd spent 63 years putting other people first. It was time to invest in the people and causes that actually valued me. Patricia's granddaughter. The women's shelter downtown where I'd started volunteering. The community garden I'd helped establish. Daniel and I rebuilt our relationship slowly, on new terms. Terms where I wasn't the one always giving. Where my presence wasn't treated as an inconvenience. Ashley and I would never be close, but we reached a kind of détente. She'd been humbled, exposed, and she knew I held the power now. And Jackson, my beautiful Jackson, I got to see him regularly again. That was the real victory. I'm telling you this story not because I'm proud of what I did, but because I need you to understand something. Sometimes the people who are supposed to love you most will make you feel like you're too much. Too needy, too present, too emotional. And you'll start to believe them. You'll shrink and apologize and wonder what's wrong with you. But there's nothing wrong with you. There's something wrong with people who can't see your value. So if you're watching this and you've ever felt invisible in your own family, hear me clearly, you deserve better. You deserve people who celebrate your presence, not question it. And if they can't do that, maybe it's time to walk away and build a life with people who can. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. And check the description box below for more stories like this one. Stories about real people who found their strength in the hardest moments. You're not alone.